The elevator descended to the parking garage with its familiar mechanical hum, carrying Madison Clarke down from the 38th floor of Pierce Financial Group's downtown Denver headquarters. At 11:47 p.m., she was once again the last person to leave the office, her Louboutin heels clicking against the polished concrete as she walked toward her reserved spot near the security booth. As she approached her silver BMW, something in her peripheral vision made her pause. Near the building's support pillars, partially hidden behind a concrete barrier, she could make out the shape of a person lying on a piece of cardboard. Her first instinct was alarm. Security was supposed to prevent unauthorized access to the garage. The figure was a young black man, maybe late 20s, wearing a clean but worn jacket and jeans. He was sleeping with his backpack clutched against his chest. And even in unconsciousness, there was something dignified about his posture. As she watched, he stirred slightly, and she caught sight of a book that had fallen from his lap, Principles of Corporate Finance. Her surprise must have made a sound because his eyes opened, immediately alert. When he saw her standing there in her expensive suit, his expression shifted to resigned wariness. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, sitting up and beginning to gather his things. "I know I shouldn't be here. I'll go." "Wait," Madison heard herself say. "How did you get in here?" He paused, seeming to weigh honesty against evasion. "The loading dock. The sensor doesn't always catch the door closing properly. But I've never taken anything, never caused any trouble. I just needed somewhere safe to sleep." There was something in his voice, education, articulation, that didn't match her assumptions about homelessness. And there was the textbook. "Are you a student?" she asked. "Was. Until 18 months ago." He stood up, shouldering his pack. "Look, I appreciate you not calling security immediately, but I know you're going to have to report this. What happened 18 months ago?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He studied her face, perhaps trying to determine whether her interest was genuine. "I lost my job," he said simply. "Then I lost my apartment. Then I lost most. Everything else? What kind of job? Financial analyst. Not at a place like this, smaller firm, but I was good at it." Madison felt a strange chill of recognition. The distance between her corner office and this parking garage seemed simultaneously vast and terrifyingly small. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus. Marcus Thompson." "Madison Clarke. I work upstairs." She gestured toward the ceiling. "Marcus, if you're good with financial analysis, why haven't you found another position?" His smile was rueful. "Hard to get interviews when you don't have an address. Harder still when you can't afford dry cleaning for your interview clothes. But you're still studying." She nodded toward his backpack. "Knowledge doesn't become worthless just because your circumstances change. I figure if I ever get the chance to use what I know again, I want to be ready." The determination in his voice was familiar. It reminded her of her own relentless pursuit of excellence. But Marcus was studying while living on the streets, maintaining hope for a future that must have seemed increasingly unlikely. "Marcus," she said impulsively, "are you hungry?" He blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "I'm sorry. Was going to grab something to eat before heading home. There's an all-night diner a few blocks from here. Would you like to join me?" The offer surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. Marcus Thompson stared at her for a long moment, and she could see him trying to read her motivations. "I couldn't pay for my own meal," he said honestly. "I didn't ask you to." Finally, he nodded. "Okay, thank you. I'd like that. Hello, my Stop Racism family. Thank you for tuning in today. Before we dive deeper into the story, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments below. Also, I'd love to know your thoughts. What did you think of the story so far? Let us know in the comments. We love reading them, and trust me, your words motivate us to keep making these videos. Let's make this video reach at least 50 comments. Your support means the world to us, and it drives us to create even more meaningful content for you. So don't forget to comment, share, and keep the positivity flowing. Murphy's Diner occupied a corner lot that had somehow resisted gentrification. At midnight on a Wednesday, it was populated by shift workers, insomniacs, and people whose circumstances didn't allow for regular meal schedules. Madison felt overdressed in her tailored suit, but the waitress treated her and Marcus with equal courtesy as she led them to a corner booth. As they settled in with coffee, Madison found herself studying Marcus more carefully. Without the shadows of the parking garage, she could see the intelligence in his dark eyes, the way he carried himself, with quiet confidence despite his circumstances. "So tell me about your background," she said after they'd ordered. "Before 18 months ago." Marcus wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. "Grew up in Aurora, working-class neighborhood. My father was a mechanic, my mother cleaned office buildings downtown. I got into CU Boulder on partial academic scholarship. Studied finance and economics, graduated summa cum laude." Madison felt a small jolt at the contrast with her own privileged upbringing. Landed a job at Rockwell Analytics, small firm, maybe 20 employees. "But they did good work for regional businesses," Marcus continued. "I specialized in identifying undervalued companies in emerging sectors. That's sophisticated work. Rockwell must have valued you." "They did. I was promoted twice in 3 years, earned my CFA certification, was being considered for a partnership track." His expression darkened. Then the owner decided to retire and sold the firm to a larger company that wanted to eliminate redundancy. "You were let go in the acquisition. Last hired, first fired. Plus, the new management team already had their own analysts." Marcus's voice was matter-of-fact, but Madison could hear the underlying pain. "I got 6 weeks of severance and a positive reference letter." Madison had seen similar scenarios dozens of times. Acquisitions that prioritized efficiency over orients, aversing ISSAs over ITZS, and leaves a rice, long-lasting color. "I've seen sufferent long-lasting color. I got 6 weeks of severance and a pauses siller in the left. My lias had exaggered as a wally to see some. My wise with 7 say. My salad, we alive. My salad, my sad. We so wide to lee so wide a sali to setad me it risen we say cly kakri guy bit kick it do we seek you decide salitus to get to go with the dice get to cause a cosset it's there to kate like lipstick up pick cut it has it it's breathe to her lip pet middle of this it's for this is this press sensitive that's people, but she'd never considered what happened to those individuals after they disappeared from the spreadsheets. 6 weeks isn't much time to find a new position, especially not during an economic downturn. I applied everywhere, got a few interviews, made it to final rounds twice, but there was always someone with more experience or better connections. Their food arrived, and Madison noticed Marcus pause before eating, as if savoring the anticipation of a hot meal. "What about unemployment benefits?" "Ran out after 6 months. By then, I'd burned through my savings paying rent and keeping up with loan payments. When I couldn't make rent, I moved in with a friend. When that became too much of a burden for him, I found a room in a boarding house. When I couldn't afford that, ... He shrugged. You ended up on the streets. Eventually, there were stops along the way, shelters when I could get in, cheap motels when I had enough for a night, sleeping in my car until it got repossessed." Madison tried to imagine the progression and found it genuinely difficult. Her own financial security felt so solid that the idea of losing it seemed abstract, but you kept studying. Like I said, knowledge doesn't become worthless. And honestly, it helps me remember who I was before all this happened, who I still am, underneath the circumstances. There was something profound in that statement. The idea that identity could survive the loss of everything external that typically defined it. "What do you do all day?" she asked. "Look for work, though that's gotten harder without a permanent address or phone number. Sometimes I help other people. There's a whole community of folks in similar situations. We share information. Look out for each other." "What kind of information?" "Which shelters have openings? Where to find free meals? Which places are hiring? Day labor." He paused. "Also financial advice, believe it or not. A lot of people end up homeless because of debt, medical bills, predatory lending. My background helps me explain their options." Madison felt a spark of recognition. "You're still doing financial consulting? Informally? Pro bono? obviously. Marcus smiled for the first time since they'd sat down. It's not the career I planned, but it's meaningful work. More meaningful than most of what happens in corporate finance, Madison said, surprising herself with the honesty. You don't enjoy your work. The question caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had asked her about job satisfaction rather than professional achievements? I'm good at it, she said carefully, and it's intellectually challenging. But sometimes I wonder if I'm just moving money around for people who already have more than they need. What would you rather be doing? Another question that made her pause. I don't know. Been so focused on climbing the ladder that I've never really considered where the ladder is leading. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Madison found herself thinking about the contrast between Marcus's situation and her own. He'd lost everything but maintained his sense of purpose. She had everything she'd thought she wanted, but was beginning to question whether any of it had real meaning. Can I ask you something? Marcus said finally. Of course. Why did you invite me to dinner? This isn't exactly a normal response to finding someone sleeping in your building's parking garage. Madison considered the question seriously. Maybe because you were reading a finance textbook while homeless, and that seemed impossible. Maybe because you're the first person I've talked to in months who isn't trying to sell me something or get something from me. And maybe because you're starting to question some of your own assumptions about success and failure. The observation was gentle but perceptive, and it hit closer to home than she was comfortable with. Maybe, she admitted. As they finished their meal, Madison found herself reluctant to end the conversation. When was the last time she'd talked to someone about anything other than market volatility and investment strategies? Marcus, she said, as the waitress refilled their coffee cups, what would it take for you to get back into finance? Hypothetically speaking, an address, a phone number, interview clothes, and someone willing to take a chance on explaining an 18-month employment gap. He paused. And probably some way to address the background check issues that come with having been arrested. For vagrancy, you've been arrested. Twice. Once for sleeping in a doorway. Once for loitering outside a Starbucks too long while trying to use their Wi-Fi. His voice was matter-of-fact. Nothing violent or theft-related, but it shows up on employment screening. Madison felt anger rising in her chest, not at Marcus, but at a system that criminalized survival and then used those crimes to prevent people from rebuilding their lives. As they prepared to leave the diner, Madison found herself facing a decision that felt more significant than it should have. She could say goodbye and return tomorrow to her comfortable life pretending this conversation had never happened. Or she could do something that might actually matter. Marcus, she said, as they stood outside the diner, I have an idea, but I need to ask you something first. What's that? Do you trust me? He studied her face in the glow of the streetlight, perhaps trying to read her intentions. I think so, he said finally. Why? 'Cause I'm about to ask you to trust me with something that could change everything, but only if you're willing to take a risk. Marcus was quiet for a moment, weighing unknown possibilities against certain hardship. What kind of risk? He asked. Madison took a deep breath, still not entirely sure she was making the right choice. The kind that might get us both in trouble, she said, but also the kind that might give you a chance to prove what you're really capable of. Madison's Cherry Creek apartment occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse with floor-to ceiling, windows that offered sweeping views of the Denver skyline. As she led Marcus inside, she saw her home through his eyes and felt unexpectedly self-conscious about the obvious wealth it represented. This is beautiful, Marcus said, moving toward the windows. You can see the whole city from here. Think. You? Madison set her keys on the granite counter. Can I get you something to drink? Water would be great. As she poured drinks, Marcus wandered through the open living space, pausing at her bookshelf to scan the titles with obvious interest. You have excellent taste in financial literature, he said, pulling out a volume on behavioral economics. This is one of my favorites. Really? Most people find Kahneman's work too theoretical. Most people haven't had their assumptions about rational decision-making completely demolished by personal experience. Marcus smiled ruefully. Turns out cognitive biases apply to life planning just as much as investment strategy. Madison handed him the water, struck by his ability to find intellectual insight in personal tragedy. Is that what happened to you? Cognitive biases. Partly. Overconfidence bias made me think my job was more secure than it actually was. Optimism bias made me think I'd find new employment quickly. And now I try to make decisions based on data rather than wishful thinking. He took a sip of water, which brings me to a question about this risk you mentioned. What exactly are you proposing? Madison had been asking herself the same question during the drive to her apartment. The idea forming in her mind was either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. Tomorrow morning, I have a presentation to Pierce Financial's senior partners about a major acquisition deal, she began. It's the kind of presentation that could determine whether I make partner this year. Congratulations. That sounds like a significant opportunity. It is. But it's also the kind of deal where having a fresh perspective could be invaluable. Someone who could look at the target company's financials and see things that might not be obvious to people who've been in corporate finance for decades. Marcus set down his water glass, his expression growing more serious. You're thinking about asking me to review the deal materials? I'm thinking about more than that. Madison took a deep breath. I'm thinking about bringing you to the meeting. As what? As my consulting analyst? Someone I've brought in to provide independent analysis of the investment opportunity. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Madison, that's insane. I'm homeless. I don't have appropriate clothes, proper credentials, or any way to explain why a senior VP at Pierce Financial would be working with someone who can't even afford an apartment. Those are all problems we can solve, she said, warming to the idea. You have the knowledge and skills. Everything else is just presentation. Just presentation. Marcus's voice rose slightly. Madison, if anyone discovers I've been living on the streets, it won't just end my involvement in your deal. It could destroy your career. Maybe it could be the beginning of something completely different for both of us. Marcus began, pacing across her living room. Why would you take that kind of risk for someone you met 3 hours ago? Because in 3 hours of conversation with you, I've learned more about finance and economics than I have in 3 years of corporate meetings. Because you're brilliant and resourceful, and you deserve a chance to prove what you can do. This isn't playing it safe. This is career suicide if it goes wrong, and career transformation if it goes right. Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face her. You really think I could add value to your acquisition analysis? I think you could revolutionize it. Your experience with undervalued companies, your understanding of how economic downturns affect different sectors. That's exactly what this deal needs. What's the target company? Madison pulled out her laptop and opened the files. Midwest Manufacturing Solutions. They make precision components for aerospace and automotive industries. Solid revenue stream, but their stock has been underperforming because investors don't understand their growth potential. Marcus moved to look over her shoulder at the financial statements. She was immediately aware of his proximity. The way he focused completely on the data. What's their current market cap? He asked. 400 million, and Pierce is offering 600 million. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, scanning through balance sheets and cash flow statements. Finally, he looked up. They're undervalued, he said simply, but not for the reasons Pierce probably thinks. What do you mean? Look at their R&D spending over the past 5 years. It's been increasing steadily, but they haven't brought any new products to market. That suggests they're developing something significant that isn't reflected in current revenue streams. Madison looked at the numbers he was pointing to, seeing patterns she'd missed despite weeks of analysis. How did you spot that so quickly? 'Cause I've seen it before. Small manufacturing companies often spend years developing innovations that completely transform their market position. The timing of Pierce's acquisition offer suggests they know something about Midwest's pipeline that isn't public yet. You think we're being played? I think Pierce is making a very smart investment that will look even smarter in 2 years when Midwest's new technology hits the market. The question is whether they're paying a fair price or taking advantage of market inefficiencies. Madison felt excitement building in her chest. This was exactly the kind of insight that could differentiate her presentation. "What would you need to do a complete evaluation?" she asked. "Access to their patent filings, detailed R&D documentation, and ideally some intelligence about their manufacturing capacity expansion plans." "I can get that, Madison." Marcus's voice was serious. "If we do this, we're crossing a line we can't uncross. If it works, you'll have gained a competitive advantage that could transform your career. If it fails, we'll both face consequences that could be devastating. I know. And you're still willing to take that risk." Madison looked at him standing in her apartment. This brilliant man who'd been reading finance textbooks while sleeping on cardboard, who'd maintained his dignity, despite losing everything. "Yes," she said, "I'm willing to take that risk." "Then we need to start with close," Marcus said practically. "I can't walk into Pierce Financial looking like I slept in a parking garage. Leave that to me. By tomorrow morning, you'll look like someone who belongs in that boardroom. Okay? And if they ask about my background, we'll tell them the truth, that you're an independent analyst with expertise in undervalued manufacturing companies. Everything else is irrelevant to your qualifications." Marcus nodded slowly, and she could see him shifting into professional mode. "Okay," he said, "let's do this. But Madison, yes, this goes wrong, I don't want you to blame yourself. I'm making this choice with full knowledge of the risks. And if it goes right," Marcus smiled, and for the first time she could see the confident analyst he'd been before. Circumstances stripped away everything except his essential self. "If it goes right," he said, "we're going to revolutionize how Pierce Financial thinks about investment analysis." At 6 a.m., Madison stood outside Nordstrom's personal shopping department, using connections and considerable charm to convince them to open early for what she described as a corporate emergency. By 7:30, Marcus had been transformed from someone who'd slept in a parking garage to someone who looked like he belonged in America's elite financial institutions. The navy Tom Ford suit fit him perfectly, complemented by a crisp white shirt, silk tie, and Italian leather shoes. But it was more than the clothes. It was the way he carried himself, the quiet confidence that good tailoring could restore. "You clean up well," Madison said as they made final preparations in her apartment. "Clothes make the man," Marcus replied, adjusting his cufflinks. "Though I have to ask, how much did this cost? Because I plan to pay you back someday." "Don't worry about it. Consider it an investment in our consulting partnership." "Our consulting partnership. We'll discuss the details later. Right now, let's focus on walking into that boardroom and showing Pierce Financial what real analysis looks like." The Pierce Financial building was a gleaming monument to corporate success, its marble lobby designed to intimidate and impress. As they rode the elevator to the executive conference room, Madison felt her heart rate increase. "Remember," she said, "you belong here. Your analysis is solid, your insights are valuable, and your credentials speak for themselves. And if someone recognizes me from the streets, then we handle it professionally and move forward. But most people in that boardroom have never walked through downtown's lower income areas. They won't recognize you because they've never actually seen you." "Madison?" Bradley Harrison, Pierce's managing partner, greeted her as they entered the conference room. "I'm looking forward to your analysis of the Midwest deal, and you must be Mr. Thompson." "Marcus Thompson," Marcus said, extending his hand with perfect professional courtesy. "Thank you for including me in the discussion. Madison speaks very highly of your manufacturing sector expertise. I understand you've done significant work with undervalued companies in that space." "I have, companies that often have more potential than their market valuations suggest." As other partners filed into the room, Madison watched Marcus interact with them. Pressed by his ease in an environment that should have been intimidating, he answered questions about his background with confident vagueness, focusing on his analytical approach rather than specific client names. "Shall we begin?" Bradley said, settling into his chair. "Madison, the floor is yours." For the first 15 minutes, Madison delivered the standard financial analysis, revenue projections, market position, competitive advantages. But when she reached the section on valuation, she shifted into territory where Marcus's insights could make the difference. However, she said, I believe our standard valuation model may be missing some crucial factors. I'd like Mr. Thompson to share his analysis of Midwest's R&D pipeline and what it suggests about their future market position. Marcus stood and moved to the presentation screen with natural confidence. Thank you, Madison. Gentlemen, I want to direct your attention to some patterns in Midwest's spending that suggest we're looking at a company on the verge of a major technological breakthrough. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus walked them through an analysis that was both sophisticated and accessible, showing how Midwest's research investments, patent filings, and manufacturing capacity expansions indicated they were developing advanced composite materials that could revolutionize aerospace component manufacturing. The market hasn't recognized this potential because the technology isn't commercially available yet, he explained. But based on their timeline and the competitive landscape, I believe Midwest will have a 2 to 3 year head start on companies that are currently valued much higher. What kind of market impact are we talking about? Asked Robert Chen, Pierce's head of acquisitions, conservatively. A tripling of their addressable market within 5 years. More optimistically, it could become the dominant supplier for next-generation aircraft design. The room was silent as the partners absorbed the implications. Madison could see them recalculating the deal's potential returns. This is fascinating analysis, Bradley said finally. Mr. Thompson, how confident are you in these projections? Confident enough to recommend that Pierce consider increasing their offer, Marcus said calmly. If I'm right about Midwest's technology timeline, $600 million will look like a bargain in 18 months. Another silence, longer this time. Madison could practically see the mental calculations happening around the table. Madison, Bradley said, this changes our entire approach to the deal. Instead of a defensive acquisition, we're looking at an aggressive growth investment in emerging technology. That's correct, she replied, which is why I thought Mr. Thompson's perspective would be valuable. Valuable is an understatement. Robert Chen was studying the analysis. If these projections are accurate, this could be the most profitable acquisition in Pierce's history. For the next hour, the partners peppered Marcus with questions about manufacturing processes, competitive positioning, and market dynamics. He answered each one with detailed knowledge that left no doubt about his expertise. As the meeting concluded, Bradley approached them both. Outstanding work, he said to Madison. And Mr. Thompson, I hope this won't be the last time we work together. Pierce is always interested in relationships with independent analysts who can provide this level of insight. I appreciate that, Marcus replied. Madison knows how to reach me if you need additional analysis. Walking back to the elevator, Madison felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. They'd pulled it off. Not only had Marcus's analysis been accepted, it had fundamentally changed how Pierce viewed the deal. That was incredible, she said, once they were alone. You completely transformed their understanding of the acquisition. We transformed it, Marcus corrected. Your presentation set up the analysis perfectly, and your reputation gave my insights credibility. So what happens now? Pierce makes a better informed investment decision, and you've probably get the partnership track you've been working toward. What about you? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I'm not sure. This was amazing, but it doesn't change my fundamental circumstances. I still don't have an address, a phone number, or a way to sustain this kind of professional engagement. As they reached the parking garage, Madison made a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. Marcus, she said, I have a proposition. For you? Another one. A more permanent one. What if we made this partnership official? Jefferson and Clarke Financial Consulting. You bring the analytical expertise, I bring the client relationships and institutional credibility. Marcus stared at her. Madison, that's an enormous leap from helping with one presentation. Is it? In 4 hours, you've demonstrated more insight than I've seen from colleagues who've been in this business for decades. But I don't have capital, credit, or any of the resources needed to start a consulting firm. I do. And I have something more valuable. The realization that I've been wasting my talents on work that doesn't matter. What if we could build something that actually makes a difference? You're serious about this? dead serious. But I need to know you're serious too. Not just about the work, but about building something meaningful together. Marcus leaned against her car, processing the magnitude of what she was offering. Madison, you barely know me. Yesterday, I was sleeping in your parking garage. Yesterday, you were a brilliant analyst who happened to be experiencing homelessness. Today, you're still a brilliant analyst who just proved he can compete with anyone in this industry. And if it fails, if clients discover my background, then we'll find clients who care more about results than appearances. What happened in that boardroom today? That's not something you can fake. That was pure analytical excellence. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, wrestling with hope and fear. What would the partnership look like practically? He asked. Finally, equal ownership, shared decision-making, compensation based on our contributions. Initially, I'd handle client development and you'd lead the analytical work. And my current housing situation, we address that immediately. I know a corporate housing company that works with relocating executives. We can get you a furnished apartment while you get established. Madison, his voice was serious. If we do this, there can't be any charity involved. I won't be your project or your good deed. It has to be a genuine business partnership based on mutual respect. That's exactly what I want. I'm not offering this because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering it because you're the most talented analyst I've ever worked with. Marcus extended his hand. Partners. Partners, she agreed, shaking it firmly. 3 weeks later, Jefferson and Clarke Financial Consulting occupied a corner office in Denver's Low-Do district, with exposed brick walls and a view of the mountains. Madison had left Pierce Financial with a generous severance package and several clients interested in working with her new firm. Marcus had moved into a downtown apartment and was splitting his time between client analysis and developing their business strategy. The solar component manufacturer looks promising, Marcus said, spreading financial statements across their conference table. Revenue growth is steady, management team is experienced, and their technology has genuine competitive advantages. Madison looked up from her laptop. What about scalability? Can they handle rapid growth if the renewable energy market expands as projected? That's the interesting part. They've been deliberately conservative with expansion, focusing on quality over quantity. But their manufacturing processes are designed for rapid scaling if demand increases. Smart strategy, building sustainable infrastructure before chasing growth. Exactly. It reminds me of what we're doing here, actually. Madison smiled at the parallel. In 3 weeks, they'd established a client base, developed their analytical protocols, and created a working relationship that felt both professional and deeply personal. Speaking of what we're doing here, she said, I got a call from Bradley Harrison this morning. Marcus looked up. Pierce wants to hire us for the Midwest deal follow-up analysis. Apparently, your projections were so accurate that they want ongoing strategic consultation as the acquisition moves forward. That's our former employer offering to pay us for expertise they could have had for free if they'd valued talent over pedigree. Ironic, isn't it? Madison closed her laptop and moved to join him at the conference table. 6 months ago, I thought success meant climbing their corporate ladder. Now I realize I was just limiting myself to their definition of achievement. Regrets about leaving? None. What about you? Any regrets about trusting a stranger who found you sleeping in a parking garage? Marcus's smile was radiant. Best decision I ever made. Well, second best. What was the first? Deciding to keep studying even when everything else fell apart. If I hadn't maintained my skills, I wouldn't have been able to recognize the opportunity you were offering. Madison felt a warm flutter in her chest. Over the past 3 weeks, their professional partnership had deepened into something more personal, though they'd been careful not to rush into anything that might complicate their business relationship. Marcus, she said carefully, can I ask you something personal? Always. When you were homeless, did you ever imagine this? Not just having a job again, but building something completely new. Honestly? No. I imagined getting back to where I was before, maybe eventually working my way up to a better position. I never imagined having the opportunity to create something from scratch with someone who shares my values. And now? Now I wake up every morning excited about what we're building together. Not just the business, but the partnership. The way we complement each other's strengths, challenge each other's assumptions. Madison felt her heart rate increase at the shift in his tone. That sounds like more than a business partnership. It is more than a business partnership. At least, for me, the admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Madison had been feeling the same thing, the way their professional collaboration had awakened something deeper. For me too, she said quietly. How's this story hitting you so far? Tell us in the comments if you're loving it. Type 1. If not, type 0. We want to know what you think. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Madison, I need you to know something. Whatever develops between us personally, it's not because I'm grateful for what you've done for me professionally. It's because of who you are, your intelligence, your courage, your willingness to take risks for something you believe in. And I need you to know that my feelings aren't about trying to save you or fix you. They're about recognizing someone who challenges me to be better than I thought I could be. So where does that leave us? Madison looked at him across their conference table. This brilliant man who'd lost everything and rebuilt his life with dignity, who'd trusted her with his expertise and his vulnerability. It leaves us figuring out how to build a life together alongside the business we're creating, she said, carefully, thoughtfully, with respect for everything we've both risked to get here. I'd like that, Marcus said, bringing her hand to his lips. Very much. As the Denver sunset painted their office walls golden, Madison reflected on the unexpected ways that life could change direction. 6 months ago, she'd been a successful but unfulfilled corporate attorney. Now she was an entrepreneur in love with her business partner, building something meaningful with someone who'd taught her that success wasn't about climbing other people's ladders. We should celebrate, she said impulsively, our 3-week anniversary as business partners. And as whatever we're becoming personally. That too. I know just the place, Marcus said, standing and pulling on his jacket. There's a diner about 6 blocks from here that serves excellent meatloaf and has the best coffee in Denver. Madison laughed, remembering their first real conversation. Murphy's Diner. You know it? I know it. And I think that's perfect. They locked up their office and walked out into the Denver evening. Madison felt the deep satisfaction that comes from aligning your work with your values and your heart with your choices. She was building something real with someone who understood that the best partnerships were based on mutual respect, shared vision, and the courage to trust each other completely. 6 months after their first meeting in the parking garage, Madison stood at the window of their expanded office space, watching the Denver skyline light up in the early evening. Jefferson & Clarke Financial Consulting had grown from a 2-person startup to a team of 8, with clients ranging from sustainable technology companies to social impact investors seeking meaningful returns. The Patterson Group wants to schedule a follow-up meeting about the education technology portfolio, Marcus said, hanging up the phone at his desk. They're impressed with our analysis of learning outcome metrics versus traditional financial indicators. That's the 3rd education-focused client this month, Madison observed, turning from the window. Maybe we should consider developing a specialized practice area. I've been thinking the same thing. There's real demand for investment analysis that considers social impact alongside financial returns. Their business had evolved naturally toward clients who shared their values, companies trying to solve real problems while building sustainable enterprises. It was more fulfilling than either of them had imagined possible when they'd taken the risk of leaving traditional corporate finance. Speaking of impact, Madison said, I got an interesting call today from Dorothy Thompson. Marcus looked up with surprise. My mother called you. About what? About the financial literacy workshops she's been organizing in Aurora. Apparently, she's been telling people about her son, the financial consultant, and now half the community wants help understanding everything from predatory lending to retirement planning. She didn't mention that to me. She was worried about asking you directly. Didn't want you to feel obligated to volunteer your time for free when you're building a business. Marcus smiled, shaking his head. She raised me to give back to the community, then worries about asking me to do exactly that. What if it wasn't volunteer work? Madison suggested. What if we developed a community financial literacy program? As part of our business model, sliding scale fees, partnerships with community organizations, maybe even grants from foundations interested in economic empowerment. You'd want to do that. Take on work that's not exactly lucrative. Marcus, 6. Months ago, I was making 3 times what I make now, and I was miserable. Now I'm doing work that matters with someone I... She paused, suddenly aware of what she'd been about to say. Someone you... what? Marcus asked gently. They'd been dancing around their deepening feelings for weeks. Their professional partnership clearly evolving into something more personal. But neither had been willing to risk the business relationship by addressing it directly. Someone I care about, Madison finished. More than care about, if I'm being honest. Marcus stood and crossed to the window where she was standing, close, enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. I love you too, Marcus said quietly. I've been wanting to tell you that for weeks, but I wasn't sure how to separate my feelings for you from my gratitude for what you've done for my life. And now I know they're completely separate things. I'm grateful for the opportunity you gave me, but I love you for who you are. The woman who takes risks for people she believes in, who builds businesses that matter, who makes me want to be the best version of myself. Madison felt tears prick her eyes. I love you because you never gave up, even when everything fell apart. Because you see possibilities where others see problems. Because you make me feel like the work we do together actually changes things. Marcus cupped her face in his hands. So what do we do now? Now we figure out how to build a life together, not just a business. When he kissed her, Madison felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was what love looked like when it was built on mutual respect and shared dreams, rather than convenience or social expectations. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked as they approached the elegant Cherry Hills Country Club, where Madison's parents were hosting their annual charity gala. Your family still doesn't know about us. Case Madison squeezed his hand. They're about to. Casa, and honestly, I'm tired of hiding the most important relationship in my life. The country club was filled with Denver's social elite, old money families. Prominent attorneys, business leaders who measured success in terms of assets and influence. Madison had grown up in this world, but it felt foreign to her now. Madison, darling. Her mother, Catherine Clarke, approached with her practiced social smile. You look lovely, and you must be the business partner I've heard so much about. Marcus Thompson, he said, extending his hand with polite courtesy. Thank you for including me in the evening. Madison watched her mother's expression shift slightly as she processed Marcus's race and the cloak implications of his presence as Madison's date, rather than just her business associate. Of course, Catherine said, her smile becoming more strained. Madison's told us so much about your ... consulting work. We've built something remarkable together, Madison said, her voice carrying a subtle warning. Jefferson and Clarke is exceeding all our projections. How wonderful. Your father will want to hear about your success. Catherine's tone suggested she was already planning damage control conversations as they moved through the crowd. Madison felt the familiar weight of judgment and expectation. Several family friends approached with carefully neutral questions about Marcus's background, their curiosity thinly veiled as polite interest. Madison, her father, Judge William Clarke, appeared at her elbow with his characteristic authority. A word. She followed him to a quieter corner of the ballroom, already bracing for the conversation she'd been dreading. He seems like a perfectly nice young man, her father began diplomatically. But I have to ask, is this serious? Very serious. If it is, you need to understand the implications. Your social position, your professional reputation, your family's standing in the community, all of it will be affected by dating someone who's brilliant, successful, and happens to be black, by making choices that set you apart from your community. Yes, I'm not saying it's right, Madison, but it's reality. Madison felt anger building in her chest. What if I told you that Marcus has helped me build a more successful business than I ever had working for other people? What if I told you he's the smartest person I've ever met? I'd say those are excellent professional qualifications. But marriage isn't a business partnership. Who said anything about marriage? The way you look at him, the way he looks at you. This isn't casual, Madison. Before she could respond, Marcus appeared beside them, having clearly sensed the tension. From across the room, Judge Clarke, he said respectfully, "I hope you're enjoying the evening, Mr. Thompson. Madison was just telling me about your business success. We've been fortunate. Madison's vision and client relationships, combined with analytical rigor, have created something neither of us could have achieved alone. And personally, are you equally committed to partnership?" The question was pointed, designed to determine Marcus's intentions regarding their daughter. Madison felt mortified by her father's directness, but Marcus handled it with grace. "I love your daughter, sir. I hope to spend the rest of my life proving worthy of that love." The honesty in his voice seemed to surprise Judge Clarke, who studied Marcus with new attention. "That's refreshingly direct," he said finally. "I don't believe in wasting time with uncertainty when it comes to things that matter," Marcus replied. After her father moved away, Madison turned to Marcus with a mixture of admiration and embarrassment. "I'm sorry about that. He had no right to interrogate you. He's protecting his daughter. I respect that, even if I don't agree with his methods. And what you said about spending the rest of your life? I meant every word." Marcus took her hands. "Madison, I know we haven't talked about the future explicitly, but I can't imagine mine without you in it." 2 months later, their relationship faced its first real crisis when a Denver Business Journal article featured Jefferson and Clarke Financial Consulting as one of the city's fastest-growing firms. The piece included background information on both founders, including details about Marcus's previous homelessness that Madison had shared without fully considering the consequences. Former homeless analyst helps build million-dollar consulting firm read the headline, and Marcus's face was grim as he set down the newspaper in their office. "I should have asked you before talking to the reporter about your background," Madison said immediately. "I thought it would be an inspiring story about overcoming adversity, but I realize now how it might affect you." "It's not about me," Marcus said quietly. "It's about our clients. How do you think they'll react to learning that half their consulting team was living on the streets 2 years ago?" Before Madison could answer, their assistant buzzed in with news that 3 clients had called to schedule urgent meetings to discuss their ongoing projects. The subtext was clear. They wanted to reassess their relationships with the firm. "We'll handle this," Madison said firmly. Together, the first meeting was with Harrison Industries, a manufacturing company considering a major expansion. CEO Robert Harrison got straight to the point. "The article raises questions about judgment and stability," he said bluntly. "How do we know this won't affect the quality of your analysis?" Marcus leaned forward. "Mr. Harrison, 6 months ago, I provided the analysis that identified the supply chain vulnerabilities that saved your company $2 million when commodity prices spiked. Has that analysis been affected by my housing situation 2 years ago? Well, no. But ... Then I'm not sure what the concern is. My analytical capabilities didn't develop when I got an apartment. They existed when I was homeless, just like they exist now." The second meeting went similarly, with Marcus addressing concerns directly and professionally. But the third client, a wealth management firm, was more hostile. "Frankly, our clients expect a certain level of stability from their advisors," said Patricia Wells, the firm's managing partner. "This kind of background raises red flags about risk assessment and professional judgment." "What kind of red flags?" Madison asked, her voice carefully controlled. "The kind that suggests someone who ended up homeless might not be the best person to advise others on financial planning." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Madison could see him wrestling with anger and hurt. "Ms. Wells," he said finally, "I ended up homeless because of a corporate acquisition that eliminated my position during an economic downturn. That's not a failure of financial planning. That's a reminder that even careful planning can't protect against systemic risks. But surely, ... If anything," Marcus continued, "experiencing that kind of vulnerability has made me a better analyst. I understand downside risks in ways that people who've never faced genuine financial insecurity can't." After the meeting, Patricia Wells informed them that her firm would be terminating their consulting agreement. "I'm sorry," Madison said, as they walked back to their office. "This is my fault for not considering how the article would be received." "No, it's not. And honestly, I'm glad it's out there. I'm tired of pretending that part of my life didn't happen, even if it costs us clients. Even then, I won't build a business on hiding who I am." That evening, they sat in Madison's apartment, processing the day's events and what they meant for their future. "Are you having second thoughts?" Marcus asked. "About the business? About us? About any of it?" Madison looked at him, this brilliant, principled man who'd maintained his integrity even when it cost him professionally. "No," she said firmly. "If anything, today made me more certain. I don't want clients who judge you based on your lowest moment instead of your demonstrated capabilities. That's a luxury we might not be able to afford if we lose too much business. Then we'll find different clients, better clients, people who care more about results than appearances." Marcus smiled for the first time since seeing the article. "You really mean that?" "I really do. We're building something meaningful together, Marcus. I won't let other people's prejudices destroy that." The crisis proved to be a turning point rather than a disaster. Within 2 weeks of the article's publication, Jefferson and Clarke received calls from 6 new potential clients, companies specifically interested in working with consultants who understood economic vulnerability and had overcome significant challenges. "Resilience Capital wants to schedule a meeting," Madison announced, hanging up the phone. "They're a social impact investment fund looking for analysts who understand both traditional finance and the realities faced by underserved communities." "That's the third social impact investor this week," Marcus observed. "Maybe losing those traditional wealth management clients opens space for relationships that are better aligned with our values." Their client base was indeed shifting toward organizations that shared their commitment to meaningful impact alongside financial returns. The work was more challenging intellectually and more satisfying personally. "There's something else," Madison said, pulling up an email on her computer. "The Denver Foundation wants to fund a financial literacy program for low-income communities. They're looking for consultants to design and implement the curriculum." "That's exactly what we talked about months ago. The community education program." "Exactly. And the funding would let us offer it free to participants while still generating revenue for the firm." Marcus read over the grant proposal requirements. This could be the beginning of something really significant, not just consulting for businesses, but actually helping individuals build financial stability. "Is that something you'd want to do?" "It would mean working directly with people in situations similar to what you experienced." "It's exactly what I want to do. Turn my experience into something that helps other people avoid the same pitfalls." Spent the next several hours outlining their proposal, energized by the possibility of expanding their impact beyond traditional corporate consulting. "You know what this means?" Madison said, as they finished drafting their response to the foundation. "That we're officially becoming the kind of consulting firm we always dreamed about. That we're becoming partners in every sense of the word. Business, personal, and now social impact." Marcus reached across their conference table and took her hand. "Speaking of partners, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Madison felt her heart skip. "What's that? Will you marry me?" The question was simple, direct, and delivered with the same quiet confidence he brought to everything important in his life. "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." When he kissed her across their conference table, Madison felt the completeness of choosing someone who shared not just her love, but her values, her dreams, her commitment to building something meaningful together. "Should we tell your parents?" Marcus asked, grinning. "Let's tell everyone," Madison said, starting with Dorothy. "I think she'll want to help plan the wedding." The engagement party was held at Dorothy Thompson's house in Aurora, a modest but warm home filled with Marcus's extended family, Madison's few supportive relatives, and the diverse group of friends they'd accumulated through their work and shared values. Madison's parents attended, though her mother's discomfort was obvious as she navigated conversations with people whose backgrounds differed dramatically from her usual social circle. "Your mother seems overwhelmed," Dorothy observed quietly as they watched Catherine Clarke attempt small talk with Marcus's cousin, a Denver firefighter. She's learning, Madison said diplomatically. This is all new for her. And for you, too, I imagine. Are you ready for a family that doesn't come with trust funds and country club memberships? Madison laughed. Dorothy, your family has something mine never did. Genuine warmth and acceptance. I've never felt more welcomed anywhere. Good. Because once you marry my son, you're stuck with all of us. As the evening progressed, Madison found herself in conversation with Dr. Angela Washington, Marcus's sister, who had completed her residency and was now working at Denver Health. I have to admit, Angela said, when Marcus first told me about you, I was skeptical. Rich white woman who found him in a parking garage? It sounded like a setup for disaster. What changed your mind? Watching you two work together. Seeing how you support each other's dreams instead of trying to change each other. And the way you've built a business that actually helps people instead of just making money. Marcus is the one with a vision for community impact. I just bring the business connections. Don't sell yourself short. It takes courage to walk away from traditional success to build something meaningful. Most people aren't willing to take that risk. Later, as the party wound down, Madison's father approached Marcus for a private conversation on the back porch. I owe you an apology, Judge Clarke said, without preamble. My initial reaction to your relationship with Madison was based on assumptions and prejudices I'm not proud of. I appreciate that, sir. You've proven yourself in every way that matters, professionally, personally, and in terms of your commitment to my daughter. I was wrong to question your worthiness. Thank you. That means a great deal. I hope you'll consider me an ally going forward. Madison's happiness is important to me, and it's clear that you're central to that happiness. When Marcus rejoined, Madison inside, she could see the relief in his expression. How did it go with my father? Better than I expected. I think we understand each other now. Good. Because you're going to be family soon, and I want everyone to get along. The wedding took place 6 months later in the Botanical Gardens at the Denver Art Museum, with a ceremony that blended traditions from both their backgrounds and dossier, and emphasized their shared commitment to building something meaningful together. Madison wore her grandmother's pearls with a simple but elegant dress, while Marcus looked distinguished in a charcoal gray suit. The guest list included everyone from homeless advocates to investment bankers, reflecting the breadth of their combined communities. Do you, Madison, take Marcus to be your husband, promising to support his dreams while pursuing your own, too? Build a partnership based on mutual respect and shared values? Asked the officiant, a friend of Dorothy's who had known Marcus since childhood. I do, Madison said, looking into Marcus's eyes and seeing their entire future reflected there. And do you, Marcus, take Madison to be your wife, promising to challenge her to grow while accepting her completely, to build a life together that honors both your individual strengths and your collective vision? I do, Marcus replied, his voice steady and sure, as they exchanged rings. Madison reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a chance encounter in a parking garage to a partnership that had transformed both their lives. The reception featured music from both their traditions, food that reflected their different backgrounds, and speeches that celebrated not just their love, but their shared commitment to using their talents for meaningful impact. 2 years ago, Marcus said in his speech, I thought I had lost everything that mattered. What I didn't realize was that sometimes you have to lose everything you think you want to find everything you actually need. I thought success meant climbing other people's ladders, Madison added. Marcus taught me that real success means building your own ladder and then helping other people climb it too. How's this story hitting you so far? Tell us in the comments if you're loving it. Type 1. If not, type 0. We want to know what you think. 1 year after their wedding, Madison stood in the conference room of their expanded office space, looking out at the 20-person team that Jefferson and Clarke Financial Consulting had become. They now operated 3 distinct practice areas: traditional business consulting, social impact investment analysis, and community financial education. The Morrison Community Center wants to expand our financial literacy program to include small business development workshops, Marcus announced, reviewing the morning's emails. They're seeing so much success with the personal finance curriculum that participants are asking for help starting their own businesses. That's exactly what we hoped would happen, Madison replied, reviewing the quarterly reports that showed not just their firms' growth, but the measurable impact they were having on individual lives and community economic development. Their financial literacy program had served over 300 families in its first year, helping participants reduce debt, build emergency savings, and improve credit scores. Several graduates had used their new knowledge to start small businesses or pursue homeownership. There's something else, Marcus said, his tone shifting to something more personal. I got a call from the Denver Business Journal. They want to do a follow-up article on our progress since that first piece about my background. How do you feel about that? Proud of what we've built, of the impact we're having, of the fact that we've proven you can be successful while staying true to your values. Madison crossed the room to join him at the window overlooking downtown Denver. Any regrets about the path we've taken? None. What about you? Miss the old days of corporate law and partnership tracks? Not for a second, though I do sometimes. Marvel at how much my life changed because I decided to have a conversation with someone instead of pretending I hadn't seen him. Best conversation I ever had, Marcus said, pulling her close. Even if it did start with you finding me sleeping in your parking garage. Second best conversation for me. What was the first? The one where you asked me to marry you. As they stood together looking out at the city where they'd built their life and business. Madison reflected on the unpredictable ways that love could transform everything. She'd started with assumptions about success and security that had kept her trapped in work that felt hollow. Marcus had shown her that real security came from building something meaningful with someone who shared your deepest values. Their story had begun with a question. What if I could change everything? It's whispered in a parking garage between two people who seemed to have nothing in common. It had become proof that sometimes the most important changes start with the courage to see past circumstances to possibilities, to choose connection over convention, and to trust that love built on mutual respect and shared dreams could overcome any obstacle. Jefferson and Clarke Financial Consulting was more than a business now. It was a model for how success could be redefined, how professional excellence could serve community needs, and how two people from different worlds could create something together that neither could have achieved alone. As the Denver skyline glittered in the afternoon sun, Madison knew that their best work was still ahead of them, built on the foundation they'd established through trust, courage, and the revolutionary idea that everyone deserved a chance to prove what they were truly capable of achieving.